Pre-order your tickets, my children! Yes, I can see how sometimes you may want to vary your media up a bit when it comes to horror. You don't just want horror comics, my children. So why don't we take in a show at the theater? The Theater is an anthology miniseries, each issue containing a different story. But the framing device is at a movie theater. Each story is a movie being shown to many different members of the viewing public. Although don't assume that the audience isn't in on the action a bit. And this, my children, is why 3D is not the best form of immersion. But having actual murder at the movie theater is. The first story, The Change, takes place as a couple sits down to watch it alone in the theater. The Change is the story of a zombie apocalypse. Or rather, what happens when the zombie apocalypse is over. Yes, a man and his son, David, have survived the zombie apocalypse as the military has finished sweeping the area and eradicating the zombies. Life moves on after such a difficult time, but it does change. Less television, less money, but ultimately people are okay and survive. But the thing about zombies is that sometimes you don't get them all. One zombie wanders a bit too near to David and his father and manages to bite the poor old man. The two do their best to try to treat it, to fight off the infection, but ultimately the father must be tied up and David resists his father's final instructions to kill him should he turn. He can't bring himself to do it until he reads the final message from his father, and he works up the courage, only to find out that he has escaped from his bonds, and it would seem the whole disaster will start again. The couple leaves the theater, arguing the merits of the story, not realizing that they are the lucky ones, since all the rest of the audience has been slaughtered. From there, it's on to Memoirs of a Serial Writer, as the theater owner's daughter prepares a gala premiere of this new film, which happens to feature her own sister in it. It is the story of a writer trying to break in and keep themselves on the bestsellers list. But other famous authors keep bumping their new book off the list. So he, or is it she, keeps bumping them off too. The story puts you into the perspective that a writer can be anyone, look like anybody, and of course when there are pen names involved, who can say who this anonymous writer really is, or what they look like? Well, you might want to ask the police officer investigating, but that's not important. What is important is that the theater owner's daughter pulled it off. The theater is paid and in the black for a while. Won't their shriveled up corpse of an owner be so proud of his daughters? Next we have The Hole. Two new employees at the theater decide to mess around with each other during a screening of this film, which is about a sad man who is being divorced by his attractive but very aggressive shrew of a wife who was more than happy to cheat on him at every opportunity. One night, the man notices a hole in his ceiling. A hole that seems to lead to nowhere. He tries to plaster it over, but it just grows larger. He can't find the other side of the hole in the attic and tests sending objects into it. Tennis balls, a flashlight, a cat, and they all disappear, never to return. So you can imagine how, after all the things his wife puts him through, especially since she plans to take the house in the divorce and leave him with nowhere to go, that he decides to send her into the hole too. Unfortunately for him, his loving daughter stops by and decides to take a look at it too, and he never sees her again. He thinks he's just delusional, especially when the hole opens up into the attic later, but his therapist soon notices a strange hole in her own desk. As for our happy couple at the theater, well, one of the other employees stops by to give them their pink, or rather red, slips. Then we have Down the Street, as the theater's projectionist tells someone with him about his dreams of writing for movies. After all, he watches them all day. Like this one, of course. A pair of friends murder their neighbor one night, burying him in a grave. One friend, Ricky, is all too happy about it and goes home to have sex with his wife. while the other, Danny, is considerably more conflicted about the whole thing, as he becomes more and more consumed with guilt and terror over what he's done. We learn why they murdered him. Seems he was a registered sex offender. A fact that he never shared with the two, even when they became friends with him. Let him hang out with their children even. Taking some preemptive steps, they decided to murder him. But Danny is becoming unraveled and decides to tell the police what they did. Ricky, obsessed with keeping the secret, tries to murder him first. But it seems Danny had a different solution in mind. He did confess, but he left a note for his wife and went on his merry way, letting Ricky take the fall while he started a new life elsewhere. As for our projectionist, well, he thought the story was garbage and would like the opinion of the two people who he has tied up, one of whom is already dead. Which brings us to our final story, Forget-Me-Not. A man investigates all the missing people from the previous story, the leads all going back to the old run-down theater. He eventually makes his way to watch a screening of this new film. This is a story about a man with an average life with average activities that haven't changed in 10 years. Except as the day goes on, no one seems to know who he is. Longtime co-workers and bosses have no memory of him working there. He's thrown out of his apartment by his landlady. Even his mother and brother eventually have no idea who he is. An ex-girlfriend is the only one whom he can convince that he has known her. But even she struggles to remember as they spend more time together. And eventually, they track down the truth, that he actually discovered his wife having an affair with his best friend and murdered the two. And was so distraught over the whole thing that he made himself forget her and what he had done. And then, after killing his ex-girlfriend to keep it secret once more, well, it seems this whole thing was a result of his wife's ghost, who makes sure that once again, everyone forgets him. And he forgets even himself over time. The investigator at the theater, a police officer, goes home that night after finding nothing. But since he plans on bringing in people to do a more thorough search later, the aforementioned theater owner's daughter takes matters into her own hands. With the officer gone, the theater is raided, but the police find nothing. But the crew of the theater have already arrived at their next destination, securing funding to take the theater chain nationwide.
I hope you've enjoyed this little matinee, my children. Just repeat to yourself, it's only a movie. It's only a movie.